Are you considering playing a musical instrument at an Irish music session? If so, then good on you. I'm here to give you a little bit of guidance and maybe a few kind of forewarnings of potential hazards that could get in the way of an otherwise potentially very enjoyable experience. So there's so many different things going on with an Irish session. It's a wonderful tradition. Apparently it's not even that old a tradition. I think maybe 50 years or so ago, maybe a bit longer than that, but not much more. It was much more a kitchen thing. So you had these kind of kitchen music sessions. It wasn't so much a pub thing. So you still have the music and the dancing and all that. That's kind of goes back a long way. But having it specifically in a pub is a relatively new phenomenon. And it's a great thing, The punters enjoy it and the musicians, come along and they get to play music together, and that can be a very, very satisfying experience. It can also be quite a difficult experience in some ways. So I remember my first time I actually played in an Irish session down in Brighton. I played the King of the Fairies. That tune. I played it on a tin whistle. And I remember my fingers were shaking. I was so terrified. I was playing with some really good musicians down in Brighton back in the day. I don't know what it's like now, but there were some really, very good players of Irish music. And I kind of had somehow developed the audacity to think that I might be able to contribute, So there's a lot of kind of hurdles to overcome, I guess, in terms of your own confidence and your perceived as well as actual, what the other musicians are kind of making of you. Are they welcoming you? Are they kind of being downright hostile, which can happen? All sorts of stuff going on. So they're a funny bunch, the Irish musicians. It's you could argue there's certain kind of traits that go into someone being willing to put in that amount of effort and time and commitment and dedication to reach a level of achievement in this, in this wonderful art of music. That ability to kind of hyper focus and all the different skills that come with being a good musician. They're not necessarily correlated with social graces. So, very often there's been sessions where, you turn up and they've all kind of got their heads down, playing their instruments furiously, the banjo and the fiddle and, button accordions, whatever, doing their thing. And not necessarily that aware of the kind of social environment that's going on around them. And that's, partly understandable because you're focusing on the music and that's the priority, right? And you can't necessarily be entertaining people with your smiles and your warm, welcoming face or whatever, while you're trying to play this really fast reel, and it's like taking everything you've got to kind of stay on top of it, So, I'm not particularly judging this crowd, but there's kind of like two. This is an idea I came up with recently. Kind of two aspects. Just one model of being a good session musician. Right? By session, I mean Irish sessions or folk sessions in general. So there's your musical ability. You need to know some of the repertoire, ideally like shared repertoire that other people know. And I'm just going to elaborate on that now because it's an important point. So sometimes people come to sessions as a kind of like a practice ground for their professional musical careers, and they'll play the latest whatever set of tunes they've learned, like really high performance stuff. And it's like it's wonderful in some ways to hear it, and in other ways it's like, well, I kind of came here to play some music. No one knows that tune. That can be an obstacle to having a good night at a session. And so there's, you've got your musical skill and then you've got the crack, right? It's like, and the crack is all about everyone basically having a good time. And there's a lot that goes into having a good time. Maybe kind of more seasoned musicians aren't, it's been a while since they've had that experience of coming into a session and being a bit, a bit anxious, a bit kind of uncertain of themselves and not knowing how welcome they're going to be. So, another aspect, you got the musical side and then you got the crack, right? And the crack is so important. And I remember down in Brighton, wonderful musician and crack master called Ben Paley, right? So fairly well-known musician. His father was well-known as well. And as well as being a fantastic musician, he was also so welcoming, so kind, went out of his way to make me feel included, wrote down a lot of the tunes, eventually there's too many to write down, but he gave me the kind of the notation for several of the more popular tunes, or the more kind of often played tunes. Because at that time, learning by ear was like, it was a new skill. I wasn't very good at it. And just, there was always this sense of like encouragement and welcome and, just just made me feel so kind of, glad to be there, happy to be there. And then there are other characters there that can give us stuff one way or the other, you know what I mean? It's like no names impugned here, but, just a totally different attitude to visiting or new musicians coming to the session. So it's a wonderful thing. And then there's the question of the instrument. So I saw a YouTube channel recently, people, particularly a guy playing a melodica, right? He plays Irish music on the melodica. It's not a traditional instrument. It sounds very much like a concertina. You might not even be able to tell the difference if, they both played well. But there are some kind of, I suppose, expectations around the instruments that you're going to bring to a session. I remember me bringing my Bohm System silver flute. Had, kind of mixed reaction. One of the reasons I did it is because a lot of the repertoire, not a massive part, but a significant part of the repertoire has these wonderful tunes in like weird keys like G minor and D minor. Not particularly weird in other contexts, but in Irish music they're less common, and I wanted to be able to play some of those tunes as well. And you can do it with like having different length whistles and then chopping and changing between tunes and all that kind of thing. But I just wanted to be able to play those other keys and also other types of music, like a bit of klezmer or a bit of, whatever other traditions I was interested in. So I played the Bohm System flute. Now, interestingly enough, I think the first Bohm System flutes were wooden. So these days you get Bohm System wooden flutes. They've become like very much a traditional instrument, like, kind of archetypal. You play the wooden flute. If you can afford it, you've got keys on it, like a Bohm. I don't know if it is Bohm System, actually, if it's a keyed wooden flute, but it's certainly, a precursor to it. And I guess, traditionally, the instruments that would be brought to a session were the instruments that were around. And if there's a bunch of penny whistles around because they're cheap and affordable, then you bring them, So playing a recorder, I'd be a little bit kind of aware of people's sensibilities around that. But at the same time, it sounds very much like a whistle. Different instruments, obviously, different tones. But again, you get the versatility. You can play on all the keys without changing instruments. You can go home and play different music. And also there's the kind of pragmatic thing of like, if you're not a professional musician or you're not playing like regularly, it's actually not great to have 2 or 3 different fingering systems that you're kind of falling back on after, years of not practicing. It's like, which one shall I do? Other instrumentalists don't have that problem. The fiddler, it's not like a different tuning, for a different, they don't have to change tunings for different kind of keys and different, musical genres. So, I've kind of settled in my old age, I guess, to like, okay, I've had a long period without playing music. I've had various health issues. I don't want to relearn, the fingering for the tin whistle and the recorder and, I don't know, like bagpipes, play different types of bagpipes. All gets a bit much. Keep it simple. Recorder. And these instruments, they're just fantastic. This is a modern hour dream. And I went for a period of playing them in sessions and no one complained because I could actually play the music, and that's the main thing, right? And also, the tin whistle, there are some drawbacks. It's a great instrument, but it's not necessarily a very loud instrument. And if you've got a lot of like accordions or several violinists to compete with, it can be very hard to kind of be heard. And then some of the solutions to that are to get these kind of really piercing whistles, like the Susato plastic whistles are really, they're very practical. They stay in tune. You can play them outdoors, but they're loud. Or these other kind of metal things where the higher notes are actually, not necessarily that pleasant to hear. So, again, the recorder has various merits in that regard. You can be heard without necessarily losing tone quality and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, a few different points here in this video. But the basic thing is, if you're thinking about going to a folk session, go for it. And understand that some people may just not be particularly like welcoming types. And, it's not about you, it's about them. But also, try and be sensitive, try and understand the existing dynamic in the group and that people know each other. And, you've got to kind of maybe different priority, recognize different priorities. So your priority might be to like overcome my confidence and play a tune, overcome my anxiety and lack of confidence and play a tune. And that's great. But, there's other reasons for people to be there, to just kind of have a good time, play tunes that they know and love. And hopefully, if you're a newcomer, then people will ask you what tunes you know, or they'll play tunes that are, really well known, classics like the Butterfly or the Kesh, or, kind of classic session tunes that pretty much around the world people will know how to play. So there's some thoughts for you on sessions if you're thinking of it as a recorder player in particular, because that's what this channel is about. But more generally, going to a folk session, Irish session to play some music. I hope that gave you some insight. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.